Hello, everyone. This is the Desert Cardinal, and what I wanted to talk about is the whole idea of triggers and how that all works. At least how I've dealt with it. Um, I think it's whether you're an alcoholic struggling with alcoholism or uh, somebody that suffers from PTSD or somebody that's bipolar. There are things that will um, trigger us, and like for instance, with me, there was one time that I had a horrible manic episode. It was actually mania. It was an antidepressant induced mania, and of course, my dog's talking right now because I'm on the video thing, just like when you have little kids and you're on the phone and they're pop 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 pop, and they always want you when you're on the phone. It's the way dogs are too. um, but um, I digress, and in the process I forget what I was talking about. um, yeah, the a few years ago I had a real bad episode, and uh, they called the cops and the ambulance and the fire truck. And now every time I hear an ambulance or a fire truck or a cop car siren, it triggers me. You know, I don't get all freaked out and stuff, but it reminds me of the past. And that's what basically a trigger is. I mean, if you want to know the operable words for determining a trigger, um, you would say, I experienced blank and it reminded me of blank. And so when it comes to whatever issue it is that you're dealing with, that's a real helpful way to figure out what your triggers are. Um, One thing I discovered when my therapist first started working with me with the triggers was that the floor plan of the house that I live in is almost the same exact floor plan of the house that I grew up in. And so, when I realized that, it was like, wow, you spend a whole lot of time, being triggered, because I had some issues that I'll talk about at some point. Hey, dog's going through the trash. Sorry. Um, uh, at some point, I'll talk about those issues, but for right now, um, there's things that trigger some. Uh, I can't think of the word. That trigger a lot of the upheaval I had in my childhood. Um, my family was great growing up. Well, I'll just come out and say it. But I was sexually abused, and and I'll just leave it at that. And there was more than one person involved, and um, so a lot of the things that I go through are triggers from that time. And like I said, my house here is a trigger in a sense that it reminds me of the um, the house I lived in growing up. And again, there's that phraseology. It reminds me of. Whenever you catch yourself saying, it reminds me of, then that's a pretty good signal that hey, I'm talking about a trigger here. And that was my dog again. Um, like the house, the floor plan I was saying, when I was little, I always wanted to have the light in the hallway turned on. And so, like when I'm sleeping right and sleeping good, and I go to bed and the light in the hallway's on, and then one of the kids gets up and turns it off, or my wife turns it off, or whatever, it always kind of, gives me goosebumps or something, because it reminds me of when I was a kid, and I would always have to have the hallway light on when I was sleeping. And so I would get up and I'd turn the light on. I'd go back to bed. I'd wake up. It was turned off. Of course, my dad or my mom would get up and turn it off. Then I'd get up and then I'd turn it on. And then I'd go back to sleep. And I mean, it would go on like that night after night, but I always had to have that light on. And so, the floor plan, the house, the light in our hallway, it's all like, you know, from when I was a kid. And so, yeah, it's like, yeah, duh, here I am in my own house, because that's what my therapist was saying. Paul, it just seems like you're triggered all the time. And once I discovered that, then I was able to deal with it more. And that's the whole thing with triggers, you know, and that phrase again, it reminds me of, all it's doing is just trying to make us aware of ourself, our surroundings, our situation. Um, because then, once you're aware of, a trigger, or whatever it is, then you can usually deal with it. But it's knowing that that's what it is. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes you don't even realize. I don't know if you've ever gotten in an argument with somebody, and all of a sudden, in the argument, you're arguing over something, really stupid, and then all of a sudden the other person just completely overreacts. Well, I'm sorry, and you're just sitting there, you're kind of like, okay. And what that is that person, by something they said, something you said, something they heard, felt, touched, tasted, whatever, it triggered something within them. And it may not have absolutely anything to do with you, but of course, you're arguing with somebody, they get crazy, and you're going to take it personal. But in reality, what's happened is that person was somehow triggered in that conversation, and their reactions are their own choices, their own responsibility. And if they're reacting from a trigger or something, it's only them that knows, and it's only them that can figure it out, and it's only them that can become aware and move on. And so, that's the thing with triggers. And there's a whole lot more to talk about. I'd like to talk about too, like how negative emotions, most negative emotions, not all, but most, stem from fear. And that's real helpful in the whole process of trying to figure out your triggers. So anyway, I hope you guys have a good evening, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.